we go on a Thursday morning edition of the Tall Can Audio Podcast, episode 1093. Happy to have Wednesday in the rear view, I guess. I don't know what it looked like for those of you outside the nation's capital, but crazy-ass day around here. Just pouring down freezing rain amidst thunder and lightning. Just weird. My name is Matt Robinson, coming to you from our studio in a freshly ice-coated Bytown, Canada. Make sure you follow along on social media at Tall Can Audio and that you're subscribed to the podcast wherever you're hearing us right now. Big show today. Dan Shulman going to be here from ESPN and, of course, from the Toronto Blue Jays broadcast team. Lots to talk about with him, mainly around your Blue Jays, Major League Baseball. Alek Manoah last night. Great start. 7 innings, just 1 hit, no runs allowed, 5 Ks. If you weren't impressed with his opening day performance, nice bounce back here. Got hit a little bit, actually. They managed to make some contact, but kept landing right in somebody's glove. So we'll take it. And I guess that's been the story they've been trying to tell us all spring, right? Is that the defense would be better. And so far, tons of evidence to support that statement very early on here in the new season. Check out episode 1092 if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. Ian Mendez from The Athletic was in studio. That was a lot of fun catching up with him. He hasn't been in a little while, but talked all about this Ryan Reynolds thing with the Ottawa Senators and the fact that he's tied himself to one ownership group, but the league badly wants him to be involved regardless of who ownership's gonna be. Lots of stuff to get into with Ian, who's just awesome at what he does, and was happy to sit down, have a pint with him, and just kick it around, right? So that's episode 1092 at tallcanaudio.com or wherever you're hearing this one. It's the next one down. And Good Friday, going to be a lot of fun. I don't know if you caught it there on Wednesday night. Women's World Hockey Championships underway. Canada takes down Switzerland pretty comfortably to get their tournament going. That'll be one of the things we get into on Friday with Michaela Schreider in studio. I will say up front here, often when I say Friday, that means it's out very first thing Friday morning by the time you're starting your day. This one will be a little later. Schreids is coming in studio early afternoon, so we'll get that out for you kind of mid-afternoon. We'll have that posted, and of course it'll be around for the rest of the long weekend while you're enjoying your Easter. But looking forward to catching up with Schreids as well. She's always down for a pint and a chat, so we'll have lots to get to with her. But today, we're talking baseball. I'll point out, before we get into this, we recorded this on Wednesday morning with Dan. So we hadn't yet seen the Wednesday night Manoah outing. We'd had one trip through the rotation, talked all about that kind of thing. But just so when you're hearing us talk about Manoah or a trip through the rotation, this was obviously done before that Wednesday night game, Toronto versus Kansas City, where Manoah had that strong outing. With all that out of the way, let's bring him in. From your Blue Jays broadcast team, it's Dan Shulman. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing well, Matt. How about you?
No complaints. Things are good. I know you spent some time down in Florida there for spring training, called some games. Now you're on the road into it for real. What's the beginning of the season here been like for you?
For me, it's been great. I love my job, so I'm very fortunate. Had a great time down in Dunedin. I always enjoy getting to cover spring training. I get down there usually for the last 10 to 12 days of the spring once I finish up my basketball responsibilities, and then right to a long road trip, right? Kind of an unusual situation because of the renovations at the Rogers Center, but on to St. Louis and Kansas City, and some ups and downs for the Blue Jays through the first 5 games as we speak, but it's a long season, and really enjoying the beginning to the year.
Before we get into the Jays specifically, I'm curious, what you've noticed now that the games count. How have players adjusted to the new rules that have been brought in? Is there anything that has stood out to you more than you expected it to, or played out differently in the regular season than it did in spring training? Like, what have you seen so far here?
I think by and large, they've adjusted extremely well. I actually thought once the regular season began, things would slow down a little, that we would see maybe batters ask for time a little bit more often, and that's not happening much at all. And if it does, it only takes 7 or 8 seconds, and it's once a plate appearance. But, I thought like every guy would use a timeout every at-bat, and it's not even close to that. It's maybe, 10 to 20% of the time that a guy is using one. So I think it's been great. I like the pitch clock. I think the players have done a really nice job adjusting. There's a lot going on, and there's still little loopholes here and there, and maybe not loopholes, but people trying to figure out some of the subtler aspects of the rule. I like the no shift rule as well. I want to see the ball in play more. I want to see more guys on base, more speed and defense, and a chance to make great plays and things like that. So, and I like the increased stolen base attempts too. I'm one of these people in favor of all the rules, and I think they're all having a nice effect so far.
Yeah, I haven't kept track of it now that we're 5 or 6 days into the season here, but very early on, the successful steal attempts were way up, and I know going into Tuesday night, the Jays were 0 for 5 in terms of throwing out would-be base stealers. I can't remember if anything happened there on Tuesday night, but with that, this is going to be a thing. Teams are going to catch on that it's a little easier to steal than it used to be, and maybe the Jays are struggling. Is it too soon to be concerned about that if you're the Jays?
I think it's a little bit too soon. In general, I believe stolen base rates are usually kind of in like the 72 to 75% range. And I don't know, this does not take into account last night's games, but I know going into last night, it was, I believe, 83% on the sport. So a noticeable increase. I think Danny Jansen will be fine. Alejandro Kirk, to me, is a guy to keep an eye on. His throws, and I don't know if there have been 2 or 3 of them, I can't remember, but his throws have not been close. And he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. But if guys are getting bigger leads and the bases are a little bit closer together, that makes it tougher on him. And I, for the last few years, for catching, throwing hadn't been as emphasized because stolen base attempts were so low. It was more about framing. And framing is important. Trying to steal a strike here and there is important. But when I was a teenager and really getting into baseball, when you evaluated a catcher defensively, it was throwing that we talked about more than blocking. Framing wasn't even a thing back then. So I think this is going to value the throwing arms of catchers a little bit more. I mean, all the studies have shown that, at least the ones that baseball, talks about, that they say they have done, people like stolen bases. It's one of the things that fans wanted to see more of, or stolen base attempts, I should say. Fans enjoy it. So if it's going to be a bigger part of the game, throwing is going to be important.
I want to talk to you about, we're one trip through the rotation right now, but before we get into that, one member of it was in the news there earlier in the week, Alek Manoah. Alex Verdugo of the Red Sox had some things to say about him. I'll drop the audio in for our listeners who haven't heard it.
If it's a genuine reaction and it's for the boys, not directed towards somebody, then yeah. Like, I'll say it right now, I think Alek Manoah goes about it the wrong way. You know what I mean? 100%. I think he does. You can find footage of him in the AAA going like this to hitters. Yeah. You know what I mean? He last year telling Frenchie and Bobby go sit and shit like that, and it's just like, and looking right at him. Yeah. So it's like, shit like that, that shit just pisses me off. And like I said, it's not the way it should be played. It should be played like you're celebrating it with your team. You're not disrespecting another player.
But just sort of talking about how fired up Manoah gets, and I guess Verdugo believes that the way he expresses that is disrespectful. There was a bit of a run-in with the Red Sox last year. I wonder if this is sort of a hangover from that. What do you make of the exchange of words now between Verdugo and Manoah?
Yeah, I don't get too caught up in it. Verdugo can be an emotional guy too. Both of them are. I understand why Blue Jay fans love Manoah, and I understand why some people on other teams may not be quite as fond of him because he's protecting his own, showing emotion, and if you're not on his team, you're not on his team. Verdugo's done some of that kind of stuff too. I don't make a big deal out of it. We'll see if anything happens when the two teams play each other. I don't think it will, but if it does, boys will be boys, and and it happens sometimes. But it was interesting that Verdugo kind of went out of his way. He wasn't asked a question about Manoah. Mm-hmm. He was asked a general question, and he responded specifically about Alek Manoah. And again, if Alek Manoah were a Red Sox or a Yankee, maybe Blue Jay fans, obviously, they'd feel differently about him. So, but a little intensity in a rivalry is never a bad thing. They're two guys who both show some emotion on the field, and I think they're each going to be true to themselves. And I don't mind a little bit of that as long as it doesn't bubble over too much when they play each other.
Do you believe Verdugo might be speaking for a larger segment of players than we as Jays fans?
That's hard for me. Yeah, that's hard for me to speculate about. But again, I understand why, people on fans of other teams might feel differently. Like if you're a Boston Bruins fan, you love Brad Marchand.
Sure.
If you're not, you probably don't, right? And I'm not saying Alek Manoah is Brad Marchand, but Alek is a very large and I don't even want to use the word emotional, but I don't think he's overly that emotional. But he shows what he's feeling, and he'll pump his fist and he'll protect his guys. And we remember, last year with Garrett Cole, there were some words back and forth, and it's who he is. But as has been well documented, he didn't have, he had at times, in some ways, a very difficult upbringing. He's had to fight for everything he's gotten, and that's part of who he is. That's wired into his DNA. So, he's certainly not the only one. I mean, there are lots of guys on lots of teams that fans of other teams don't love, but it's part of what
Jays
makes
fans
him.
remember Strowman and loved him too, right? So
Right.
it's
Right.
a little different, but if he's your guy, you love him. If he's not, you don't. And
Right. And this is part of what makes him who he is and part of what makes him successful. In my opinion, it's that burning desire to be the best that he can be and take care of his teammates and fight for what he believes in and all that sort of thing. So listen, it's professional sports. There's a lot on the line. Things get heated. These kinds of things happen from time to time.
So as you and I sit here right now, this isn't going to drop until Thursday, but we have seen one trip through the rotation. And while I believe, like most baseball fans, it is the height of insanity to judge a season or a rotation based on one trip through it, I do wonder if it's fair to start to talk about one member of it, again, who's gotten off looking to a start that looks an awful lot like what we saw last year. What did you make of Jose Berrios' start on Monday?
Well, as was the case last year, velocity was good and his pitches looked like they were moving. But when he makes a mistake with location, he gets hit. And I said to Buck on and off the air, he gets punished for every mistake. Like he never gets away with a pitch. Mm-hmm. And you don't always have to make a perfect pitch to get a swing and a miss or to get a guy out. But it looks like if he doesn't make a perfect pitch, he gets hit. It's a little mystifying to me. There must be something where they see it well. I don't know if he's tipping. I mean, that's always a conversation when a guy gets hit like this. But Jose Berrios, for the first 5-6 years of his career, was a rock solid, steady, reliable, above average major league starting pitcher.
Right.
And I don't see why that should be so different now. He's 28 years old. He's in incredible shape. He works his tail off. And some of it I just don't get. So I'm sure they're going to go back to the drawing board again and try to figure this out. They've tinkered with his hand position, his where he stands on the rubber, the pitch mix, everything. I mean, they keep tinkering with everything. You have to be concerned. If you dig a little deeper on last year, and I may be slightly off in this, but like 23 of his 32 starts were good or really good. Mm-hmm. The 9 that were bad were really bad. And that's why he had a 5.23 ERA. When it got away from him, it really got away from him. Like almost everything was like 2 runs or under or 5 runs or more. He didn't have any average outings. So they just need him to be average. I give him credit that he went back out there and got through 5 2/3 and didn't burn out the bullpen that night. But yeah, I think there has to be some concern because it's happening too often for it to be coincidence.
The other name that we came into maybe a little bit concerned about, or who was a bit of a question mark, got off to the complete opposite start this year. Yusei Kikuchi had a very nice 5 innings, 3-hit performance. What did you make out of him that allowed him to look better than he did at much of last year?
Yeah, he was really good. Only walked 1, had 1 wild pitch, and it was really wild. And then, but right after that, he kind of righted the ship again, and everything was fine. The pitch mix wasn't as different as I expected it to be. It was more just about the execution, the location, that sort of thing. A lot of people within the Blue Jays organization seem to think the pitch clock is a very good thing for Kikuchi. Think less. Just get the sign from Jansen, throw the pitch, trust your catcher. Just focus on, your conviction in the pitch and trying to hit your spot. His stuff's always been good. We know that. I think he was a little predictable at times in the past. And like Berrios, I think when he left pitches over the middle of the plate, he would get smoked. So I think he made better pitches, more to the edges, less in the middle. In the past, it would be ball 1, ball 2, ball 3, and then wham, home run. Right. Or, he'd have to come right down the middle. When he's not falling behind 2-0 and 3-0, his stuff really plays. So Very encouraging. Not a good team, not a good offensive team in the Royals. Let's see how it goes against the Angels and then the Rays, which I think will be his next two starts. But again, he doesn't have to be a star. They just need him to compete and keep them in games. Can he give them a decent 5 innings, give the bullpen a chance, give the offense a chance, and very, very encouraging start for him.
Gausman had a little bit of bad luck in his start. That's carried over from last year. Both Manoah and Bassett were down a little in velocity. I don't know if that's common early in the season. It's just sort of we circle through, our first trip through the rotation. What did you make of the top 3 guys there?
Yeah, Gausman was really good. Like you said, bad luck. A Matt Chapman error and then a 2-run squibber between Chapman and third base. 2 things you'll never see in the same game back-to-back again. And all the weird stuff seems to happen in Gausman starts. He looked great. I think he's going to have a great season. Manoah velocity was actually up. It was down in the spring, but it was actually up in his first start. I think he made a couple of mistakes, some middle pitches, and they got hit. He's been too good to say, hey, there's concern right now. He's never had 2 in a row like that in the majors. So you got to believe that he's going to be fine. And between the time we're speaking about the time this drops, he'll have pitched again. So who knows what will happen. And for Chris Bassett, his velocity was down a little bit from like 93 to 91. Something to keep an eye on. Too soon, I think, to say there's concern. There's a lot going on for him. New team, new catchers, pitch clock, pitch calm. Is he calling his own pitches? A lot of different things for Chris Bassett than he's dealt with before. And he's a very, he's a thinker and a tinkerer and a lot going on the mound. And I'll be interesting to see if anything changes when he makes his second start. So I think Bassett bears watching more than the others. But again, they don't need him to be a star. Just go out. If he can just go out and be the guy that he's been the last couple of years, that's going to be enough for this team. And he's been around the block a few times. I'm sure he'll figure it out.
I wanted to ask you what you thought of Dalton Varsho here after his first few games as a Toronto Blue Jay. He's shown again early on, small sample size, that he's maybe hitting lefties just a little bit better than we might have expected. He's already set a personal best with his exit velo on a pitch this year. Like, it looks like he's gotten off to a pretty encouraging start. What have you made of his debut with the Jays?
I'm a huge fan, absolutely a huge fan. Super nice guy. Always willing to talk baseball, and I think he helps you win games a lot of different ways. Initially, I'm sure a lot of Blue Jay fans who had never seen the Diamondbacks play looked at the trade and said, you traded Gabriel Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel for a 235 hitter, and that is a very, I get it, but that's a very surfacey way of looking at this trade. First of all, I think if you care about batting average, I think that's going to go up moving from Chase Field to Rogers Center. He hit 27 home runs. He is an exceptional base runner. We've seen already his ability to bunt for a base hit, which is kind of a lost art, but he does it mostly against lefties, who he doesn't have a lot of success against generally, although he did 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And he's great at it. I mean, he's just absolutely great at it, at getting aboard by trying to bunt for a base hit. He's a very, very good outfielder. Good range, good jumps, good roots. Threw out a runner on Tuesday night with a perfect throw from left field. He helps you win games a lot of different ways. Left-handed bat as well, which is, as we all know, they didn't have many of those at all the last couple of years. So we've only seen him for about a week, less than that in the regular season. But I think he's a great pickup, and I think he's going to be a very, very important part of this team in the coming years.
One of the conversations throughout the offseason when they moved out Gurriel and they moved out Hernandez and they brought in a Kiermaier and a Varsho and Brandon Belt is, we can exaggerate this a little bit. Maybe we're focused on it too much, but the home run jacket and the Barrio and changing the vibe and the mood around the team. What is the vibe early on? Have you noticed a significant change in the way the group interacts and spends time together?
Yes, 100%. And not to embellish it, and this is not, this is not just me saying it for the sake of saying it. It is different. When you bring in guys like Kiermaier, Belt, and Varsho, you've already got Matt Chapman there. You just look at who they have on the team. And some of the personalities have changed, for better or for worse. Each individual can decide how they feel about that. But in speaking with a lot of people during spring training, there is no question that, and it's become, I know some people probably roll their eyes about it, but it's true. The focus, the attention to detail, the little things, all of those cliches, you didn't hear people like me talking about that in recent springs because that wasn't what we were getting from players and staff. That's what we're getting from them now. And I think it's definitely true. Like, that's how Varsho is. That's how Kiermaier is. That's how Chapman is. And in my mind, Chapman is the leader of the team, and even more so here in his second year than he was in his first year. And I think they understand the last couple of years, they've been talented, fun, underachievers. They could have, should have done a little bit more maybe than they did. And their goal this year is to not have that same label. I think they'll still be fun. They won't be, maybe quite as fun, or they'll be fun in a different way. You take the personalities of Gurriel and Teoscar Hernandez out of the dugout, and it changes a little bit. So, the Barrio doesn't, it'll be different when the Blue Jays get back home. I'm not sure. The Barrio doesn't seem to exist anymore. We know the home run jacket doesn't exist. I know they didn't do anything on the Bo Bichette home run. I didn't notice anything on the Varsho home run. Also, like post-game interview on Tuesday night when Varsho was doing the interview with Arden Zwelling, no Gatorade, nothing got dumped on him.
True.
Which is something that happened every win, road, home or road, in recent years. So I know there were conversations about these kinds of things at the beginning of spring training, and I think collectively some decisions were made about, hey guys, fun is great, but it can't be, the thing you're known for the most. Like, it's time to get a little bit more serious and win games.
Hazel's dry cleaner will be disappointed if
exactly.
If the Gatorade is gone. You mentioned Matt Chapman there. He's off to a hot start, but he's a free agent at the end of the year. What do you think the Jays' interest is in keeping him? What do you suppose his interest might be in sticking around? Do you think he's been happy in Toronto? What's the likelihood he'll be here again next year?
Yeah, I think he's very happy. I think he enjoys it. At the same time, he's a year away from free agency, and he has earned the right to become a free agent at the end of the year if they don't do something during the season. The likelihood is impossible to predict. We don't know if he'll have a great season or not. We don't know what the Blue Jays are thinking. And also, you look at a guy like Addison Barger, one of their top prospects, can play third base. So, and he's at AAA right now, right? So that may factor into the equation as well, depending on the kind of season that Barger has. If he kind of makes it obvious that he's ready for the big leagues. They do have some money coming off the books at the end of this year, notably Hyunjin Ryu, and who knows about Kiermaier, Merrifield, Belt. Merrifield's on the last year of his deal. Kiermaier and Belt are on 1-year deals. So, who knows what kind of money may come off, or if any of those guys are going to be back. And as much as they've spent, and they've spent more than they've ever spent before, there's only so much to go around. And Vladdy will get a raise, and Bo Bichette will get a raise, and Jordan Romano will get a raise, and et cetera, et cetera. Bo's raise is baked into his contract. So, it's a giant jigsaw puzzle, right? And you can't look at Chapman just on his own, because a lot of other things impact it. I believe, and I think and hope, you just put it aside for now. I don't think there will be talks during the regular season. I don't know that, but I don't think there will be talks during the regular season. I think you just kind of play it out and have everybody focused on trying to win a championship, and then see what happens in the offseason.
What do you make of the bullpen this year? Because I think it to a lot of fans, it feels a little bit like past years. There's a lot of it's better than it's been in past years, but it's still kind of missing that one big swing and miss arm. I guess they're hoping Swanson can bring some of that, but when you bring somebody in and you got men on, you want that one big power arm that just comes in and gets you out of it instead of pitching to contact or whatever. And they don't really have that again this year. Were you surprised they didn't, go out and bring in something like that? And what do you make of this group?
Well, I think, as you said, they're thinking or hoping Swanson can be that guy. So there's no question the bullpen is better. They have Eric Swanson. They didn't last year. They have Anthony Bass for a full season. They didn't last year. So those to me are two upgrades. Sure. I don't believe it's an elite bullpen, but I think it's a good bullpen. Romano looks great. Tim Maze's outing on Tuesday night was terrific and very encouraging. Jimmy Garcia gave him some big outs as well. Like, there are a lot of good arms. What they don't have is, Minnesota's got Yohan Duran, and Seattle's got Andres Munoz, guys who can come in the 8th inning, even, never mind closing a game, and just blow you away. I don't know that they have that guy in front of. They don't have that guy in front of Jordan Romano. I think they've got a lot of good relief pitchers, and they're really, really, really focused on putting them in the right situations to succeed. And you saw it on Tuesday night, 6th inning, but it's the top of the order. Here comes Jimmy Garcia. Bring him back out for a 2nd inning and get him to the part of the lineup where the lefties are coming up. Then go to Tim Mesa. Mesa gets through the lefties, but they still need one more out. So Eric Swanson comes in for one batter to finish off the 8th, and then Romano does his thing in the 9th. I think the roles are really good right now, and the understanding of how to give these guys a good chance to succeed is really good. 2 names to mention. Every year we talk about Nate Pearson, and can Nate Pearson be that guy? Right. I don't know. 2 good outings so far at AAA. Kind of wait and see, right? Because it's been a few years. Can he stay healthy? Can he throw strikes? That sort of thing. Obviously, if he is able to put it all together, he's got a chance to get some big outs and get some big strikeouts for this team. Another guy who has pitched in a lot of big games, and again, maybe he's not, super elite, but maybe he goes kind of into that category with Swanson and Jimmy Garcia, is Chad Green. Right. Chad Green's been a very good pitcher, got a lot of big outs for the Yankees in high leverage spots over the years, and he's coming back from Tommy John surgery and hopefully is available for the second half of the season. So those are just 2 names to keep an eye on. It's a good bullpen. To me, it's a good enough bullpen to be part of a playoff team. Can it get you a World Series championship? That remains to be seen, but a lot can happen between now and the end of the year.
Last thing for you then, Dan, is I wanted to ask you what you thought of this year's World Baseball Classic. And I've talked to a few different people about this. I kind of came into it, I guess like I often do. It's spring training, there's pitch limits, there's, it doesn't feel all that. I'll watch when Canada plays in a couple of other notable games, but I don't really expect to engage in this. And it just sort of built and built and built, and of course could not have possibly climaxed any bigger than Ohtani versus Trout in bottom of the 9th inning, Japan, USA, the biggest matchup you could have delivered. It was fantastic. And I just wonder, this one feels different to me. This one feels like in future years, maybe you've now you'll have convinced some more American pitchers to show up. You'll have sold a bigger TV audience. Is that just recency bias, or do you think this one is bigger than some of the past ones?
I think it was a little bit bigger. I mean, if you talk to people, say, in Korea, they might talk about a couple of the others where their country fared better, right? But but you're right. The Ohtani Trout thing was enormous. The whole game I thought was great. And there were 3 or 4 just phenomenal games, right? With late leads or drama in the 8th or 9th inning. And you saw a lot of good stories. I like it a lot. Is it a true best on best around the world tournament? Not really, but how many of those do we have? Even Olympic basketball sometimes is not really that, and we haven't had best on best hockey for years, so we don't have anything to compare that to. It's hard to get true best on best international events in from the professional sports, the North American professional sports. I thought it was great. I thought it was really fun. There's no great time to do it. I don't think you can do it at the All-Star break. I don't think you can do it in November. I think this is the time you have to do it, and I understand the hesitancy of pitchers to do it. I heard Kevin Gausman giving an interview, and he said he thinks it's great, but if they asked him, and amazingly enough, they didn't. The United States never asked him to be a part of the team. He said he probably would have politely declined because he doesn't want to be thinking in January about ramping up to face Juan Soto in March, right, when what he really wants to do is to be pitching in the first week of November. So it just felt like too much, too long for him. And so maybe, from a pitching point of view, maybe you're going to get younger guys or a little bit less established guys, that sort of thing. Like from a Canadian perspective, Nick Pivetta got COVID. Mike Soroka, just not healthy, so he wasn't able to do it. Zach Pop wanted to make the Blue Jays. Jordan Romano had committed to Italy in 2017, pitched for them, and then had committed to them again this time out of loyalty. So those were a lot of good arms for a lot of different reasons that weren't part of Team Canada, and it might have been a different story had they been there. But I think it's fun, and I think if everybody just looks at it as, hey, isn't this super cool, rather than life and death, then you can enjoy it a little bit more and just watch the drama unfold.
I wonder if the Americans just lost track of Gausman up here in Canada and
Yeah, maybe. Kind of strange, huh?
Exactly, for sure it is.
Yeah.
Dan, I appreciate your time. You're always good to make a few minutes for me. I'm sure I'll come knocking again later in the summer. But until then, I hope you have a great season and a great call. And thanks for doing this.
All right, Matt, thanks. Enjoy the season.
All right. Great talking to Dan Shulman. Awesome. Just one of those guys who's just so good at his job and has kind of reached this peak and very well respected. And you kind of sit back and I don't know what the hell he's doing here on Tall Can Audio, but we're happy when he makes time, and we'll no doubt we'll touch base with him again here as the season rolls along. Don't forget, go back, check out episode 1092 with Ian Mendez. All kinds of stuff on the Ottawa Senators involved in that one, and on 1094 coming at you on Good Friday. Michaela Schreider will be back in here. That's going to be great as well. So lots of great stuff around right now on the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're following along on social media at Tall Can Audio. My name's Matt Robinson. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on Friday.
That's it. I cannot work under these conditions. If anybody wants me, I'll be downstairs at McDougal's. Call the weekend guy. I don't care.